Hey everyone, welcome to Book Trip. We are in the month of February where everybody's getting a lot of snow. So unfortunately, Lindsay, my co-host, couldn't make it today and she is snowed down like a lot of others. And also she's got no power and no internet, but she's cheerleading for us, especially because we have the one and only Jim Alkon from Book Trip, which is huge. So I know that marketing, promotion, strategies and how to get your book out there in the market is huge for all of us. We keep talking about it over all the different social media platforms. We have author groups where we connect. And I thought, what could be better than getting the man himself from Book Trip onto Story Mantra? So welcome, Jim, to Story Mantra.
Nice to be here.
We're
I hope I can live up to the build-up.
It's an honest.
You're intimidating me.
No. I mean, Lindsay and I have really been looking forward to having you. This is so exciting for us. And I'd just like to tell everybody a little bit about Jim. Phenomenal background in terms of his love of books. So Jim Alkon is the editorial director of booktrip.com. And if you look below the video, you'll see the link to Book Trip. And he's responsible for all editorial operations, content, and strategy while developing new marketing programs to help authors get on the literary radar, which we know is huge for any author coming out with a book. No matter how many books we've done before, there's always that next book. As a veteran of the business-to-business media and marketing worlds, he has extensive experience in business and content development. He is an avid reader of sports and music. He loves dogs. And Jim plays the piano by ear. That's exciting.
Not going to happen today, though. Sorry.
Going to happen today. He is a writer at heart. So that's the best part about Jim is that he's not just there to sell books. He knows what the process is of writing and putting a book together. Whether it's a book review, whether it's corporate communication, blog, or white paper, it really doesn't matter as long as his words are making someone happy somewhere. Jim brings a strong sense of humor, a love for the written word, and caring sensibility to the office. So thank you, Jim, for coming on. And a little bit about Book Trip, which is the buzzword for almost every author coming out with a book today. Book Trip was created 16 years ago as a news source for people who love books, want to find out what's happening in the book world, and love learning about great authors, of whom they may not have heard. And Jim, maybe you can pick up and tell us about the visitors, the social media hits you get, and a little more about Book Trip.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I wish half of what you just said was true. I mean, it sounded to, I don't know where you got that.
Well,
so let me just tell you a little bit about Book Trip. Book Trip is part of a full-scale literary marketing and publicity firm called Meryl Moss Media. Meryl has been in the marketing business for over 30 years. About 16 years ago, as you alluded to, she created Book Trip as a community of readers. And this is kind of interesting because think about it. She's a publicity firm, but Book Trip suddenly is a content machine. We're spitting out content, news stories every day, book reviews on all genres. And we have built our community to a point where we get about 66,000 unique monthly visitors, which represent about 1.2 million impressions. We have, I think, over 80,000 social media followers. So somehow here's a publicity firm that has this content element. And why was it created? It was created at about a time when the major metro newspapers were starting to curtail their coverage of books. Again, it was quite a while ago, and it predates my time at Book Trip. But if the major metros were cutting their book coverage, think about that. Best-selling authors are going to be scratching and clawing to try to get coverage however they can, or their publicity machines are going to be doing that. What does that say for the emerging or up-and-coming author? How in the world are they going to compete with less real estate covering it? So Book Trip was created pretty much to serve as the voice of these emerging authors, to give them a voice, to provide a place where we serve as a discovery zone for our readers. They're always looking for new titles, new authors, and what am I going to read next? Right. So we combine that idea of being a community for readers with an editorial and marketing machine for authors and the publishers that serve those authors. So we created what we think are some affordable programs to allow authors to really get on the reader radar, to get on the map. Right. Now, everything you see on Book Trip Yeah, go ahead. Question?
I was just
You have a
wondering,
question?
do you know where your readers who are discovering new books are coming from? Where are they coming from?
Well, we've been building them. We've been building them for 15 years. So, we will our social media is very active. They have found us over time. They see the reviews that we have. The demographic is pretty much all over the map. It ranges from about 25 to 65 in terms of age. It's about 70% female, 30% male. Their interests are all over the place. I mean, they're a very diverse group interested in all different genres, contemporary fiction, thrillers, romance, nonfiction, memoir, self-help, children. I'm probably missing a few, but
Right.
it's really very widely diverse. And that's based on surveys that we have done as that community increases. And again, it wasn't always as large as it is, but we've been around for a while.
Mhm.
So it's a question of building it, of people finding it, of word of mouth. And it's interesting, we'll talk a little bit about word of mouth later, because
Yeah, that's a
when
big one.
people ask me what is, well, they'll say, what do you think is the best marketing strategy these days? And we have all these programs to do different things, and so do a lot of our competitors, or colleagues, if you will. But it's funny, word of mouth just seems so simple. If somebody who you trust and rely on and are on the same wavelength of taste tells you, hey, you know what, I think you'll really like this book, I don't think anything is more powerful. So part of the question is, as we talk about marketing, how do you get to the point? How do you get to the point where people are talking about your book or sharing it, or two people that you don't know are off someplace and somebody read it and they're going to tell somebody else about it? How do you do that?
Right.
Wish I knew. No, I mean, I'll give you some ideas, but that's the idea behind Book Trib, giving a voice to these emerging authors. And the truth is, when you talk about self-published books, for
Mhm.
example, we'll talk to authors all day long, all different shapes and sizes, all different quality of work, frankly. But one of the first things I tell them is, do you know how many self-published books hit the market every year? And they're going to say, oh, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000, try 2 million. 2
Every
million
year?
every year. Well, no, not every, it's growing.
Wow.
So this year it's about, or this past year is about 2 million self-published books. That says nothing of the books that are affiliated with the large publishing houses, the mid-size, the small. So it's a competitive market out there. When we do visual presentations and we're speaking with people, sometimes I'll show this slide, which I don't have handy, but it'll have a person sitting in a stack of books, and there'll be thousands and thousands of books, and I'll have a little dot in the corner. And I'll say, you see that little dot? That's your book.
Oh
That's your
my
book.
gosh.
And this is what you have to compete against. So just so, you know what, and we do it to manage expectations.
Right.
We really want somebody, because people will call us and say, hi, can you get me on the bestseller list? And I'll say, what bestseller list is that? And
I mean,
I'll make some
here's a question. When you talk
Yeah.
about the bestseller list, for example, how does Amazon, how do you deal with Amazon rankings and getting people's books out there? Because all these self-published books definitely are available on Amazon too.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We have a program where we generate Amazon reviews. We have 1,000 Amazon reviewers. So if somebody says, boy, I'm in dire need of those reviews, we actually have a network that we can reach out to. And we can't guarantee it. We can't guarantee it because we can't make somebody read a book. But somebody that I was in communication with today, she said, that's an interesting program. I'd like to do it. Are they all going to be 5-star reviews? And I said, that would kind of defeat the purpose. I mean, we have a network where we can reach out and get you more Amazon reviews, but I can't make somebody love a book if they don't love it,
Right.
and we're not going to artificially, take that approach. But it's interesting. So when you think of all the books that are out there, it's very competitive. So when somebody, again, people have no idea, and part of the no idea is they will write a book and they'll always say, and it's really quite good if I do say so myself, which is always fun to hear. And you know what, sometimes they're right. I'll tell you, but they just have to understand that there are very good books out there that just won't strike gold.
Right.
We have come across some incredible self-published books, and again, not all of them, but some of them certainly merit column every year saying, here are the 15, whoops, can you still hear me? I'm saying internet connection unstable.
Yeah, I think we kind of
I'll say, Oh, can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Okay. So, I'll write a column and say, here are 15 great books from people that you probably haven't heard of, but probably should. Because over the course of the year, somebody will say, can you review my book, or what can you do for my book? And first of all, the first step is we have to believe in it, because if we think a book is not going to resonate with our audience, we don't want to waste our time. So we
So
really,
what's that first step then? For you to believe in a book, what's the first step that an
well,
author?
I just have to take a look at it. I mean, a lot of people will approach us and say, how can you help me? And I'll say, well, the first step is, can you send me, if the book's out there, send me a link. I want to go on Amazon or whatever and just sort of see the summary. I want to look inside a little bit, or send me the first chapter or so.
Mhm.
And we really spend time doing that. And if we don't think a book is going to resonate with our audience, we're not going to go ahead and help them promote it, because it just won't be fair to anybody. And everybody will come out a loser at the end. So really, we want to make sure that it has, and we'll look at everything from content. We're not so much, well, I'll tell you, we see a lot of final books that have obvious spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes in the first couple of paragraphs.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because, some people will get really upset when we tell them we just can't help you. But I mean, I know our readers are just going to reject it, and they're going to be frustrated. And we can't in good conscience recommend a book that has basic errors like that.
Right.
So that's the first step. Also, I don't know if you want to get into timing yet, or we can talk about that later.
We can, we can go with, that for sure. We can get into the timing. So since we're on the topic, what's a lead time that authors need to be thinking about?
Yeah, well, first of all, the reality is some authors, here we are, February 16th. I'll get calls from authors today saying, I have a book coming out March 1. How can you help me? And certainly, if we're going to do a book review, you have to think that through for a second. One, we have to get the book. We have to get it in the hands of a reviewer. The reviewer actually has to read the book.
How much time do they need now? Say, if you
typically, if somebody wanted to do a book review with us, about 2 months, that kind of neighborhood. But if they want to do an extensive plan where we do a lot of different elements for them, it usually helps to be thinking about this maybe 3 or 4 months in advance, so that we can plan it out properly and get them the timing and the scheduling that they want. And so many of the self-published authors, they're just not thinking about that. And who can blame them if it's the first time? They just don't know. I mean, I'm not faulting them, but there does require some time. And I think a lot of authors, they think the end of the line, the end of the journey is, okay, I've written the last page and the book is done. But we look at that as kind of the beginning. But it also depends on what your objectives are.
Right.
I mean, some people are satisfied with writing a book, and if some people like it, or if they get a review where somebody says, hey, you understood me, you really got what I was trying to do, that's great. That's fine. Others say, you know what, I want it to be commercially successful, and that too, what does that mean? Because I think a big step, any kind of program you do with Book TRIB, there's a big step, and we never talk about, here's how many sales you're going to make, because we just can't. We all we can do is get you that exposure. There's an enormous step between investing a little bit in marketing and coming to the underlying saying, boy, I'm selling a lot of books. And that is just letting an audience get aware of you and get comfortable with you and learn who you are and get some exposure. A first-time author just can't show up and invest a little bit of money and say, all right, this is terrific. It's a long process. And
let me ask you a golden key question, which a lot of people ask. The golden key question I have is, what helps validate or bring logic to the success of a book? Apart from good writing, clear language, no grammar, syntax, or spelling mistakes, none of that. A good, clean book, which is a good read.
Yeah.
How do you validate?
All right. Well, I would answer it with 2 words. I'd say story and voice. Okay. Is the story compelling? Is it something that's going to attract me? And I'm talking, it could be a novel, it could be not a memoir. It doesn't have to be fiction, but is the story compelling? That's the first thing. And then the voice, because we run into tons of authors, self-published authors that have great stories to tell. They're great. They captivate you from the first page, and don't discount the first page. Some people, I never like the expression, well, you'll get into it. Well, no, I won't get into it. If I'm not into it right from the
Yeah.
beginning, I'm going to get into something else.
Right. Right.
But the story and the voice, there are people, and we all have our own voices, and again, we try to make judgments based on what we think a large audience will like. But there are people you can connect with, and I'll know pretty soon, for my own taste, that, hey, this person is speaking in my voice. I either like the sense of humor, or I enjoy the language. It's very literary, whatever it is, I can usually tell pretty quickly. So it's that voice, it's the craftsmanship of the language and the story. Now another point I want to make, and I can keep going all over the place, but some people will say, my book came out 9 months ago or 2 years ago. Did I lose my window? And I always say, books are pretty evergreen.
Right.
If people were only interested in books that just came out, then in the days where we used to walk into bookstores, remember those days?
Oh yeah, they're gone.
In those days,
they're coming back. They're coming back with a
I hope so. Boy, I used to love doing that, but the point being, you'd walk into a bookstore, you'd see the front table, it would have all the current books, and then you'd walk back and all the shelves would be empty if people were only interested in the current books. And that's not the case. They're always interested. So timing doesn't matter from that standpoint. It really doesn't. But you do have to be thinking, let's talk about the launch, okay? Because
that's a big question, because on Book Trip, you have pre-launch campaigns, you have, you have bundles, you have a la carte choices and options as well. So are those specific to pre-launch or?
Not necessarily, but what I want to say about the launch is so many people try to put all their eggs in that launch basket. My book is coming out April 1. So everything is targeted to April 1. I've got this lined up. I've got that lined up. Everything's happening on April 1. I'm going to drive around town in a convertible with a megaphone and confetti and start throwing it on April 1. So everybody in the world has to know that my book is coming out. By around May 1, you're sitting around, playing with, some toy in your house because you don't know what to do with yourself, and all of your marketing eggs have been used up, if you will.
Yeah.
So really, what we emphasize is, you do want to do a lot of stuff around the launch, but space it out. Space it out. We one author that we dealt with, boy, was he he had his act together to the point where he showed me a 40-page marketing plan. I don't think you need that, but I think what helps is spread things out. That's what some of Book Trip's programs try to do. If you do a program that gets your book on our website, we have other programs that will get you back on our website a few weeks later, and then a few weeks later. So you still have
what helps, Jim, in the longevity of an author's book promotion plan? What factors should we take into consideration?
Well, I would take this in consideration, that you want to get in front of an audience as much as you can, as much as is reasonable, as much as your budget will allow. Think of commercials on the radio, or think of them anywhere. You typically don't really drive that spike in the ground until about the 5th or 6th commercial. You'll hear a commercial and you'll tune out, or you'll change the channel, you'll start thinking about what you have to do that day. Then you'll hear it again and again to the point where it's annoying. And then you'll think, you know what, I could actually use that product,
It's like like the law of 7 or something, isn't it? That you have to see the product 7 times.
Exactly. So there's the idea of how many times can you get in front of an audience. If you do it once, that's better than 0. But whatever you can allow. And again, whether that audience is the Book Trip audience or some other organization, I mean, you have to do as much as you can, because I think, when we were talking before this, the question was, what works and what doesn't, and the answer, I mean, the old expression about marketing, that 50% of all marketing works. Have you ever heard that expression?
No, not this one. No, please tell me.
Well, they say 50% of all marketing works. You just don't know which 50%.
That's like
so you really have to go out there and be in a lot of places. And again, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not as simple. It's not as simple as saying, hey, I invested some money and now my problems are solved. So it's really keeping that pace, doing a few things, again, if it's an old book, don't be afraid to space it out. You and I were talking a little bit about if you have a series, what do you do
Yes.
in the event of a series? Okay, you
Yes.
have 3 books in a series, and you're just coming out with a 3rd book, and somebody will say to me, okay, I'm not sure what I want to market exactly, or how do
So
I
I
market?
actually have a series, Jim, and the book
Oh,
2 is coming out sometime in summer. And so here I am asking the questions that I'm sure many other authors are asking. How do I go about it? What should I take into consideration? What
well,
about book 1?
yeah, well, that's the first. The first thing is, what did you do with book 1?
Right.
Did you have an aggressive marketing plan? Were you successful with book 1?
Mm.
Because some people will say, or I'll tell people, well, you have 4 books in the series, you're not that well known. With all due respect, you're not a household name. So should I focus on the current one? And I say, well, do you want them to read the series backwards? And of course, then there's also the issue of, do you need to read the first one in order to understand the second one? Some books are standalone, even though they're series. Some books, it helps to know the first one before you read the second one, because there are going to be some nuances that you'll appreciate. But first of all, what makes sense from the author's standpoint? All things being equal, I say, if you're not that well known, start with book 1. Let them start with book 1. It doesn't matter when it came out, because they're going to say, wow, this is great. Is there another one? And anytime Book Trib would do a review, if we were to do a review of book 1, there's always an author bio, and we would explain in the bio that this is the first of a series of books. So so how do you do that? Some people say, this is my current one, this is the one I'm all excited about. I'll say, I know, but people don't really know your first one. So I would try to go in sequence, unless there's a good reason not to.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, before we have to, and there's a little clicking timer, which tells me that, we have to end the session quickly. But before you join us again next week, and before we end the session, what's a marketing tip that you can share with a lot of authors out there? And, give us a few items to think about, please.
Yeah, some of you might already be doing this. This is always a fun way to market, but there's value in comparing your book to 2 other books. I don't know if you're doing this. We have an author right now, he's saying it's the Hunger Games meets Westworld. We worked with an author a while ago. His name was Anju Gross, and he had a book called Button Man, which was about the Jewish mafia. But in all his promotion, it said, The Godfather meets Great Expectations. So suddenly what you're doing, and we see this happening all the time. Think about it. Try to think, what are the 2 books that your book is somewhere in the middle of? Because 1, it's a good soundbite. You can use it
Right.
in all your marketing. 2, it kind of creates a visual image, doesn't it? You're sort of thinking, okay, I know what those books are, so you're somewhere in between. That's good. Also, look at the association. You can pick 2 bestsellers that everybody has heard of that are very commonplace, and say, my book is sort of a cross between that one and that one. While you're not necessarily saying it's at the level of a
At
Great
the level of-
Expectations, you're at
Right.
least saying, you know what that book's about, you know what this book's about, I'm somewhere in the middle.
Plus,
So
I guess that also allows you to create a little bit of a market space for yourself, or a shelving space.
it helps define who you are.
Yeah.
It helps define who you are. And in defining who you are, I don't know how much time we have, but just quickly, know your genre. I
Yeah.
mean, some people try to be all things to all people. Some people will say, I'm a this, and this, and that's going to confuse the audience. Be as specific as you can. There are romance writers that say, well, my genre is romance. And then I can come up with about 8 subgroups. I say, go very specifically, but know who your audience is, and then know where they learn about books. So there's some ideas.
Well, thank you, Jim. That's a lot to think about, but definitely for people, with books coming out in the next quarter or 2 quarters after, it's definitely stuff that we can start looking into and start putting together for a marketing plan, because that's really a big hub chunk of our conversations, besides the craft of storytelling. But marketing is huge. So we really appreciate the time on Story Mantra. And, we would love to hear more in next week's episode. But thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you being here. And for everybody out there, look below and you will see the link to Book Trib. And also Meryl Moss Media. We'll have both the links up there for you. And in the next video, we'll have Jim explain the difference between the 2 as well.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you,
happy to
Jim.
be here, and hope that was helpful.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.